Okay, this is the game that I played yesterday. I'm playing white, and my opponent is rated about 100 points, rating points higher than I am. And well, actually, this illustrates how that we must take this rating not that serious, because I won this game in only 16 moves. So ratings indicate something about your playing strength, but they really don't mean that much. A difference of 100 points is not that big. So okay, let me show you the game. I played d4, and my opponent replied with knight to c6, and after c4, knight to f6. This is called, this system, this defense is called the tango, and it's become quite popular in Holland. I've met it quite a lot lately. The last time that I played this with white, I played here knight to c3, and then you get all kind of variations with e5, my black, and I wanted to avoid that because normally black players know the theory of this very well. So what I did was, instead of knight to c3, I played knight f3, controlling e5 immediately, and then we got a transposition to a Nimzo-Indian defense, an old style Nimzo-Indian classic style with the knight on c6 instead of the knight developed to d7 and the possibility of playing the pawn from c5, from c7 to c5. Queen c2, d6, bishop d2, and then I played e3. Castle e3, and here I expected my opponent to play rook to e8 to support the advance of the pawn from e6 to e5. But what my opponent did was play e5 immediately. I played d5, and his knight went to b8. That looks like a very strange place to go, but the idea is that after knight b8 he can find a way to c5, and that's a good square for the knight. So it loses time, but it's justified by this plan of black. I played a3, and he took on c3, and I took back. And now he played bishop to g4. I looked this position in my database, and I found that a5 has been played before in a game between, well, two for me unknown players, Mr. Wood and Mr. Koenig, in 1946. That game was won by black, but it's well, the next moves in that game were like this, then c6. But anyway, in this game yesterday, my opponent played bishop to g4. I played my bishop to e2, which is a little bit passive. Maybe it would have been better to put the bishop on g3 immediately and not be afraid of getting a double pawn here, because the g file opens. He played the knight to d7, and now I made a positional mistake. This is actually a big error that I made here, because during the game I was afraid that he could push his pawn to e4 and then use these two squares for the knights, but actually there is no real danger right now in that. What I did is I played e4 myself, and that was wrong. But fortunately for me, my opponent didn't react the correct way. What he did is he played his knight to h5 with the idea of making use of the square f4. Well, it's a logical idea, since with e4 I lost control of f4. But the thing is that after knight h5 I can take on e5, because the bishop on g4 is undefended. So I took on e5, and he took on e2. After knight takes d7, we see that white has a much better position. I mean, if the queen takes back on e7, then queen takes e2, then this knight is attacked. Even if he goes here, then queen f3, and I simply have won a pawn, and this diagonal is open now for me. So the position of white is really much better. Now my opponent didn't want to await this, so what he did is, instead of retaking on d7, he took a big risk by playing bishop takes c4, and of course I took on f8, and then he played knight to f4, threatening check on d3 and taking on g2 with check. But simply after castling queenside, all problems are solved for me, and the position is hopeless for black. Is an exchange down and a pawn, and after for example queen takes f8, I can play immediately taking on g7, and then after retaking I can take on c4, winning one more pawn. So in this position, after castling queenside, my opponent resigned. I'll go back to a position after taking on e5, because my opponent took here on e2, but actually he could have taken on e5 back, and after bishop takes e5, then taking on e2. The difference is that if I take back with the queen, he can play rook to e8, and then place this rook in this file, and well, actually I have to save my bishop now. So for example, bishop to g3, and although he has a pawn less, he has compensation because of this pressure that he can put on the e-file. So this could have been an option for him to first take on e5 and then on e2. But well, fortunately for me, he took on e2, and after knight d7, bishop takes e4, it was all over in this position. So right, that's the short game that I played yesterday.